Coral Balmoral, of course, was a new experience for me and my battalion. We were then pitched into the big league. We were well out of, of course, our area of Phuoc Tuy province, and we were on the approaches to Saigon. We knew that there were very large North Vietnamese forces in the area, but the extent to which we would engage them was always part of the fog of war, I guess.
The Royal Australian Navy experienced its share as well.
Go east, 175.
Working alongside the Americans, patrolling enemy waters and supporting troops ashore with gunfire. A little-known Navy helicopter unit flew with the Americans, taking their gunships into hot landing zones to drop and protect Allied troops.
As we break out of this young rubber, there in front of us was this enormous force of enemy that the ground seemed to stand up. But just for a split second, I thought, it's decoming, There was just this momentary pause. Then the carrier on my far right, Richard Gross, said, "It's the enemy," and opened fire. We started to edge forward, is the only way I can describe it. It's a matter of firing and in some cases actually running over the people. And we kept going, and we were suddenly out of these people. Just to pause and describe, they were actually falling back to the east in good order. They were going back firing at us, covering the others as they were pulling out. I saw they were dragging their wounded, actually. They seemed to have loops or whatever around their ankles, and they were dragging their wounded out, and they were going across our front and out to the northeast. It's a pretty grim business.
And all of a sudden, amongst the noise of the machine guns and artillery, there appeared the noise of diesel engines. And here were these armoured personnel carriers coming through the gloom, guns firing, and some of my forward soldiers got up, because the enemy, as soon as these tanks arrived, the enemy just turned and left. Now, there was not another shot fired. And I think a lot of my soldiers thought that they were never going to arrive and that we would never get out of it. And a lot of them stood up and went over and gave the carriers a gentle pat on the side, and certainly shook hands of the Armoured Corps guys and probably some of the A Company guys that came out in the carriers.
National serviceman Kenny Gant did not greet the armoured personnel carriers. His life was lost earlier in the battle.
He's like the rest of them. He stayed there until the death. He died at his post defending his mates.
The last memory Mother Beryl had of Kenny was when she gathered with family to say goodbye.
They were supposed to leave after midnight. So he said to me, "Mum," he said, "hang on a minute," he said, "I've got to go and get me cigarettes," he said. I said, "All right." Waited there for him and he didn't come back. And I said, "Where the devil is he?" Next thing we heard the plane leaving. The boys were all on the plane. They were taking them away. We didn't even get to say goodbye to him. I think that was the worst part of the whole deal, and I couldn't get over it. I got home, I was more like a zombie than anything, with not being able to say goodbye to him. So we just had to pick up from there once he'd gone. But every time I went out in the yard and heard a plane come over, oh, I thought of Kenny all the time. I just couldn't get him out of my mind.
Another conscript who fought alongside Kenny Gant had been severely injured and presumed dead. To make it through the night, he packed his wounds with mud to stem the bleeding.
I thought, oh shit, I'm in a bit of trouble now that I'm going to be on me Pat Malone all night. So it was just a matter of trying to survive the night. And with some of the enemy coming around during the night, I just worried whether I was going to survive that as well. So when I did call out a couple of times for help, I got fired at. So I just kept quiet then and just hoped that they'd pick me up first thing in the morning.
Our job that next morning was to go and visit the injured at 36th Vac Hospital in Vung Tau. And I remember standing outside. Cole had his guitar and we were ready to go into a particular entrance of the hospital, and we were saying to each other, "How do you feel?" He said, "I'm all right, how are you?" And I said, "Oh yeah, I'm all right." But we weren't. We were feeling pretty teary and sad and propping each other up. Eventually the door opened and we went inside, and of course we didn't cry. But much later I did. And just seeing the many wounded and their young faces, you know, they all look like my brother.
Even the first day the day I woke up in bed at the hospital. I even had a dream that the same night after that, and that all the blokes in the dream were all them friends, all my mates that were killed. And I just said to them, "It's only a dream. When I wake up, you'll wake up in the morning with me." Well, that dream's kept with me from Long Tan until now. It doesn't happen every night, but it happens quite often, that I still have that same one dream about those young blokes, telling them that, you know, when I wake up, they'll wake up with me.
No matter what battle Australians were engaged in, this aerial lifeline gave even the most severely wounded soldier a chance.
As the war wore on, casualties realised that if they were badly hurt and they could survive till they got to our pad at the hospital, which was known as Vampire for some strange reason, if they made Vampire, they reckoned they had a pretty good chance of surviving. And I think probably that must have had a very good effect on the morale of the soldiers, to know that first of all they were going to be very rapidly evacuated, and then they were going to be dealt with efficiently.
There was one young man flown in with 5 bullet wounds across his chest. He was in the triage for about an hour before we really thought that he was okay to be operated on. The surgeons put in 48 units of blood in 3 points, and medical people will understand that that's a lot of blood in. It was really coming out as we were putting it in, but he was then in the operating theatre for the next 8 hours. He couldn't go out on the next evacuation to Australia. He was too ill to go. He came to after his 8 hours and, using the good Australian vernacular, spoke to the nurse and said, "Give us a kiss." So we knew there was no brain damage, but we were all a little concerned that he had had some brain damage.